Every family has a story, but not every story is told in joy. Some are written in quiet battles, where respect is tested and loyalty is questioned. This is the story of a mother, her son, and a wedding that was supposed to unite two families, but instead revealed the true meaning of dignity and strength. Picture Charleston in spring, magnolias blooming, lanterns glowing, Spanish moss swaying gently from the oaks, a grand house waiting to welcome guests, polished floors ready for music and laughter. For one mother, this vision was more than decoration. It was a promise that her family, 30 strong, would stand together to witness her son's new beginning. But promises can break. With a single phone call, everything changed. A bride's demand for simplicity became a plan to erase half the family. A mother's check, signed with hope, was treated as nothing more than money. And in that moment, she realized, without her, there would be no wedding. This is not just about flowers or venues. It is about loyalty, heritage, and the quiet power hidden in silence. Stay with me, because what begins as a wedding dispute becomes a lesson about family bonds, respect, and the strength of one woman's resolve. Vivian Chandler sat at her kitchen table, the late afternoon light falling across a cream envelope. In her hand was a pen hovering above a check worth $25,000. To most people, it would look like a simple payment. To her, it was far more. It was a promise, a mother's blessing written in ink. She imagined the scene that money would create: Charleston in springtime, magnolias blooming, Spanish moss swaying from the oaks, the Gadsden house standing tall with its white columns, lanterns glowing in the garden, laughter spilling across polished wooden floors. She pictured her son Eric at the altar, proud and smiling, with his bride beside him. And most of all, she saw her family, 30 strong, filling the room with warmth, voices, and love. For 20 years, Vivian had raised Eric alone after her husband Richard passed away. Every success of his life had been her victory, too. Each achievement felt like a medal pinned to her chest. This wedding was not just his celebration, it was hers as well. Signing that check meant securing her family's place in the story. Her hand trembled, but not from weakness. It trembled from joy. She placed the check neatly into the envelope, smoothing it with care. "This," she whispered to herself, "is what family is for." Just then, the phone rang. Eric's name glowed on the screen. Her heart lifted, expecting excitement, gratitude, maybe even that boyish eagerness that had never quite left his voice. She answered warmly, "Darling, I just finished writing the check. The venue deposit is handled. You'll be so proud when you see the place. It's pure Charleston charm." There was a pause. Then Eric spoke, his tone heavy. "About that, Mom. Lauren wants a smaller wedding, just her family. We'll keep the wedding, but only her side. Could you just send the check? We'll handle the rest." Vivian froze. Her sisters, who had rocked Eric as a baby, her cousins who had traveled across states for birthdays, the church ladies who had prayed for him when he was sick, all erased with one decision. 30 lives dismissed as if they were unwanted guests. She asked carefully, steady though her voice trembled beneath, "Are you saying your entire family is not invited to your wedding?" Eric hesitated. "It's not like that. Lauren just wants it her way. You understand, right? It's her big day." Her Southern pride stirred. Marriage was not supposed to be about one family. It was about two families joining, roots and branches weaving together. The Chandlers might not have the Bennetts' wealth, but they had something more enduring: loyalty, dignity, heritage. Vivian did not argue, not then. She placed the phone down gently, as if roughness might shatter her further. She looked again at the check, her signature glowing dark against the paper. Her hand shook once more, but this time it was not joy that made it tremble. It was the weight of betrayal. In that quiet Charleston evening, she realized something important. Without her, there would be no wedding. The pen in her hand carried more than numbers. It carried power. And though the ache of widowhood stirred again, the part of her that weathered loss and hardship was awake. What happens when a mother discovers her strength lies not in tears, but in the ink of her own name? The story is only beginning. The next morning, Vivian dressed with care, her shoulders squared, her pearls resting neatly, and her dress pressed smooth. If Lauren and her family wanted to treat her as an afterthought, they would at least do it while looking her in the eye. She walked into the wedding planner's office, a space designed with soft whites, polished oak, and brass accents. It should have felt welcoming, but instead the air was cool, rehearsed, as if the room had already decided to keep her at a distance. Lauren sat first, flipping through a glossy binder. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, a diamond glittering on her hand. Beside her, Brianna leaned back with the poise of someone who measured others like fabric, deciding quickly which piece was worth keeping and which was not. "Mrs. Chandler," Lauren said without warmth, her eyes flicking up only briefly, "so glad you could make it." Vivian smiled with deliberate grace. "Please, call me Vivian." She spoke the way Southern women do when every nerve in their body is tightening, but the smile never falters. Kayla, the planner, began talking about the venue, color palettes, and menus. Her voice carried the rhythm of someone used to smoothing quarrels. But soon enough, the conversation shifted to the guest list, the very subject Vivian knew would come. "I thought," Vivian said, laying her hands flat on the table, "that since the Gadsden House is such a beautiful, large venue, we could make this a true family celebration. My sisters, my cousins, our church community, about 30 or so on my side. That way both families are represented." Lauren's binder snapped shut with a sharp sound. She looked at Vivian squarely, a hint of steel in her young face. "Actually, Vivian, we've decided it will be just my family. My parents are covering the caterer, the music, the decorations, so it's really our call." Brianna tilted her chin slightly, lips curving into a polished smirk. "Lauren is right. It will be tasteful, intimate. Simplicity is elegance. Don't you agree?" Vivian felt her cheeks grow hot, though she did not let the heat rise to her voice. Inside, humiliation churned, but outwardly she poured sugar. "Elegance, dear, is when everyone feels welcome. That has always been my understanding." Lauren's smile sharpened. "Well, this time it's our understanding that matters." The silence pressed against the walls. Kayla shuffled her papers nervously, wishing herself anywhere else. Vivian looked from daughter to mother, and what she saw was not two women planning a wedding, but two generals plotting a campaign, and she was their enemy to be outflanked. She swallowed the bitterness. Southern women did not storm or rage. They waited, they calculated, and then they acted. That was when Kayla, perhaps trying to change the subject, casually added, "Of course, Mrs. Chandler, since you paid the deposit, the contract is actually in your name. Nothing can be finalized without your approval." The words slipped out like an afterthought, but they landed in Vivian's ears like thunder. She kept her expression calm, nodding politely as though she already knew, but inside something shifted. The ground that had felt like quicksand beneath her only minutes before now felt solid. She had not lost her place in this story. Not yet. The meeting dragged on with talk of flowers and photographers, but Vivian scarcely heard. Her mind was alive, sharp with the knowledge that while they dismissed her, they had overlooked one critical fact. Power often hides in the quiet details. When they rose to leave, Brianna offered her manicured hand with a smile that carried triumph. Lauren avoided Vivian's gaze, already reaching for her phone. Vivian, too, smiled, but hers was different, small, controlled, and dangerous, like the edge of a blade hidden beneath silk. As she stepped out into the bright Charleston sun, the weight of humiliation had already begun to transform into something else entirely. She held the cards now, and sooner than they realized, the game would change. They thought she was powerless, but the ink on that contract told another story. Back at home, Vivian sat at her kitchen table once again. This time, the check was not in front of her. Instead, it was the contract. Line after line of legal words filled the page, but one detail mattered more than all the rest. Contract holder, Vivian Chandler. She traced her name slowly with her finger, testing whether it was real. It was her ink, her signature, her authority. The humiliation of the meeting still stung, but here was clarity. They had mistaken her for a spectator. They had forgotten whose hand had sealed this arrangement. Vivian picked up the phone and dialed Kayla Monroe, the planner. Kayla answered quickly, her voice professional. "Mrs. Chandler, good afternoon. How can I help you?" Vivian kept her tone polite, honey covering steel. "Kayla, I need to make a few adjustments. For now, please freeze all vendor contracts, caterer, florist, invitations. Nothing moves forward until I say so. And update the reservation name. From now on, it should read Chandler Family Event. Make that official." There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. Kayla hesitated only a moment before replying. "Understood. I'll make the changes immediately." Vivian ended the call with calm assurance. It was not triumphs yet, but it was steadiness, the feeling of having her hands back on the reins. Of course, Eric noticed quickly. That evening, her phone rang again. His voice was tight, nervous, caught between two fires. "Mom, Lauren just told me the planner said things are on hold. Did you change something?" Vivian answered evenly, not unkind. "I simply paused the process until certain matters are sorted." "Mom," he groaned, "please don't make this harder than it already is. Lauren has her vision. She's been working so hard." "She may have her vision," Vivian said gently, but with steel beneath. "But Eric, this is not only her wedding. It is your wedding. It is our family's wedding. And if my family isn't welcome, then no one is walking down that aisle." The silence on the other end was sharp. She knew her words struck him because she heard the long exhale that followed. "Mom, please, can't you just let Lauren handle it? She wants everything perfect." Vivian closed her eyes, picturing him as a boy, hair tousled from play, pleading to skip chores. But this was not about toys or curfews. This was about dignity, about blood. "No, darling," she said softly but firmly. "Perfect does not mean erasing your family, and I will not sign away our place in your life to keep her illusions tidy." Eric muttered something about calling later and ended the line quickly, no doubt rushing back to smooth feathers. Vivian did not cry. She had shed enough tears in her life for men who forgot their loyalties. Instead, she walked out onto the porch. The day slipped into evening, the sky burning gold and crimson above the rooftops. Cicadas hummed like a chorus of truth. She poured herself a glass of sweet tea, the ice clinking softly, and leaned against the railing in the quiet southern twilight. Inside her, something hardened. They thought she would bend. They thought she would write checks and smile politely while being erased, but she knew better, because the paper in her kitchen bore her name, and with it, her power. The battle had begun, not with raised voices, but with quiet strength, and soon Charleston would see how far a mother's resolve could reach. Charleston by night carried its own kind of elegance. Gas lamps flickered along cobblestone streets, and the air was scented with jasmine drifting from hidden courtyards. That evening, Vivian arrived at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Its entrance glowed with warm light, the hush of privilege filling the air. She had dressed carefully, navy silk, pearls resting against her collarbone, every line in place. If she was to be dismissed, it would not be for lack of presentation. Eric rose when she entered, his face relieved but uncertain. Beside him, Lauren offered a tight smile, her eyes cool, politeness worn like duty. Brianna, elegant in a cream suit, gave a nod that felt more like granting an audience than greeting a future in-law. The waiter led them to a private table. Silver clinked softly, a violin trio played in the background. On the surface, it was civil. Beneath, tension crackled like a storm waiting for lightning. Brianna began smoothly, her voice carrying the ease of someone long accustomed to control. Vivian, Charleston is such a charming place, so quaint, so full of character. I suppose your relatives must find it dazzling. The way she said relatives made it sound like intruders. Vivian smiled, unruffled. They've always loved Charleston. Our family has been here for generations. We've got roots deep in this soil. Lauren leaned forward, a gleam in her eye. That's sweet, but for the kind of wedding we're planning, it might be overwhelming. We want to keep it refined, streamlined. Vivian set her glass down carefully. Family gatherings built on love are never messy. 30 more people at the table won't ruin refinement, darling. It will only add joy. Lauren's lips curved, sharp as glass. Eric and I have talked about this. My family is paying for everything else. The catering, the flowers, the band. Honestly, it only seems fair that it's our call. Eric's just lucky, really, marrying into a family that can give him this. The words cut deeper than any blade. Lucky, as though her son had been rescued by their money, as though her sacrifices meant nothing. Brianna laughed lightly, lifting her wine glass. Yes, dear, it is quite the blessing. Your son should be grateful. Vivian felt her chest tighten, but she would not give them the pleasure of seeing her flinch. Instead, she leaned back, folding her hands with measured grace. Gratitude is a fine virtue, but I taught my son that gratitude should always be balanced with respect. Both families deserve that. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Lauren glanced at Eric, her expression expectant, almost daring. Eric shifted, his fork clinking nervously against the plate. "Mom," he said, voice low, pleading, "please don't make this harder. Lauren's right. They're doing so much for us. Maybe we should just let her handle it." When Eric's words came, Vivian's heart cracked, but her dignity stayed intact. She smiled slowly, evenly, like the tide that always returns. "Of course, Eric, you must do what you think best." Her voice carried no tremor, though inside something broke. The dinner went on. Courses arrived. Laughter was shared, though none of it from her. She tasted nothing, heard little, only the echo of betrayal filling her ears. When dessert menus arrived, Vivian rose. "Forgive me," she said gently. "It has been a long day. I'll leave you all to enjoy the evening." She felt their eyes on her back as she walked away, but she did not falter. Her dignity was intact, though her heart ached. Out on the street, beneath Charleston's lamplight, she paused. The night air was cool, jasmine strong, and in that quiet she felt her resolve harden. They thought they had silenced her, but they had only awakened her. When loyalty wavers and pride blinds, truth has a way of revealing itself at the most unexpected moment. Eric carried the weight of the dinner with him for days. The silence between him and his mother grew heavy, and rather than face it, he withdrew. One evening, he found himself at a downtown bar, the kind of place where young professionals gathered after work. The lights were dim, the wood polished, and the air softened by quiet music. He sat at the counter, shoulders heavy, speaking low to a friend about how impossible everything felt. He told his friend about the tension, about his mother's insistence, about Lauren's demands. He admitted he felt torn in two directions, unable to please both sides. His words carried the exhaustion of a man caught between love and loyalty. And then, fate chose that very moment to reveal the truth. Lauren walked in, surrounded by her bridesmaids. Laughter trailed behind her like perfume. She did not notice Eric sitting only a few feet away, hidden in the shadows of his own doubts. Her voice carried across the room, careless and bright. "It'll be perfect," she said, satisfaction dripping from her tone. "Eric's family won't be there, no embarrassing country bumpkins spoiling the photos. Just us, just class." Her friends laughed, sharp and cruel, the kind of sound that bruises more than it entertains. Eric froze. The glass in his hand stilled midair. For the first time, he saw her clearly, not as the woman he thought he loved, but as the architect of his family's erasure. The manipulation, the pressure, the way she had turned him against his own blood, it all clicked at once. The silence inside him was louder than her laughter could ever be. Meanwhile, miles away, Vivian was making her own preparations. She called her sisters one by one, speaking lightly, not revealing too much, but enough to let them know. "Keep the date free," she told them. "There may be a wedding yet, and when there is, I want my family ready." Their voices rose with surprise, some with indignation, but mostly with love. "Of course, Vivian," one cousin said softly. "We'll be there. You just say the word." Their loyalty steadied her. They had stood by her through Richard's passing, through the lean years when every penny counted, through Eric's milestones. And now, even in this insult, they would stand with her still. Her resolve was no longer hers alone. It carried the weight of generations who had never bowed their heads to money or arrogance. She sat at her kitchen table after those calls, pen in hand, making notes, preparing quietly, not with noise, not with anger, but with precision. They thought she would come undone. Instead, she was stitching herself tighter. Eric must have left that bar with a heart heavier than when he entered. Outside, the Charleston night was cool, the city sounds muffled by the roar inside his head. He pulled out his phone, staring at his mother's number, thumb hovering, torn between two truths, the woman he thought he loved and the mother who had loved him every day of his life. He did not call that night, but a seed of doubt had been planted, watered by Lauren's own arrogance. And while he stood frozen under the glow of the streetlights, Vivian was making her own preparations. She called her sisters one by one, speaking lightly, not revealing too much, but enough to let them know. "Keep the date free," she told them. "There may be a wedding yet, and when there is, I want my family ready." Their voices rose with surprise, some with indignation, but mostly with love. "Of course, Vivian," one cousin said softly. "We'll be there. You just say the word." Their loyalty steadied her. They had stood by her through Richard's passing, through the lean years when every penny counted, through Eric's milestones. And now, even in this insult, they would stand with her still. Her resolve was no longer hers alone. It carried the weight of generations who had never bowed their heads to money or arrogance. She sat at her kitchen table after those calls, pen in hand, making notes, preparing quietly, not with noise, not with anger, but with precision. They thought she would come undone. Instead, she was stitching herself tighter. Eric must have left that bar with a heart heavier than when he entered. Outside, the Charleston night was cool, the city sounds muffled by the roar inside his head. He pulled out his phone, staring at his mother's number, thumb hovering, torn between two truths, the woman he thought he loved and the mother who had loved him every day of his life. He did not call that night, but a seed of doubt had been planted, watered by Lauren's own arrogance. And while he stood frozen under the glow of the streetlights, Vivian was making her own preparations.
She called her sisters one by one, speaking lightly, not revealing too much, but enough to let them know. Keep the date free, she told them. There may be a wedding yet, and when there is, I want my family ready.
The morning of the meeting, Vivian dressed with deliberate care. A cream linen suit, pearl earrings, hair swept into a neat bun, every detail chosen with purpose. In Charleston, one did not go to war with raised voices or weapons. One went with dignity, manners, and an iron will hidden beneath lace. Kayla's office was bright with sunlight pouring through tall windows, the polished oak table set for another round of planning. Lauren was already seated, tapping her manicured nails against her phone, impatience filling the room. Brianna sat beside her, spine stiff, eyes sharp as glass. Eric stood awkwardly near the window, shoulders hunched, as if hoping to disappear. "Vivian," Brianna began, her voice cool and polished, "I hope you've reconsidered. We really must move forward with the planning. Time is short." Vivian smiled gently, setting her handbag down before taking her seat. "I've considered, Brianna, and I've come to a very simple conclusion." She folded her hands on the table, steady, unshaking. "Without me, there is no venue, no vendors, no wedding." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that stills even the air. Kayla glanced quickly at Vivian, then at Lauren, her pen frozen mid-note. Lauren's face flushed red, her composure cracking. "You can't you wouldn't dare. We've planned everything around this. Do you know how many people are expecting invitations?" "Indeed," Vivian replied softly, "and so are my 30 relatives. Funny, isn't it, how they were all so easily forgotten?" Lauren slammed her binder shut, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. "If you're going to sabotage this, maybe there won't be a wedding at all." Brianna leaned forward, fury simmering beneath her carefully drawn lips. "This is ridiculous. My daughter has invested too much to have it ruined by petty demands. We are offering refinement, class, respectability." "Respect," Vivian cut in smoothly, "is not something purchased, Brianna. It is given freely or not at all." Her voice was even, never raised, but every word carried weight. Years of Southern gentility had taught her that sharpness need not be loud. Eric finally spoke then, his voice uncertain at first, but growing firmer with each word. "Mom's right." Lauren turned on him, eyes wide with shock. "Eric!" He shook his head, stepping forward. "This is supposed to be about 2 families, not 1. I've let things slide. I've kept quiet, but enough. Mom isn't wrong. If her family isn't included, then this wedding isn't what it's meant to be." For a moment, Vivian saw her son again, not the boy swayed by flattery, but the man she had raised to value fairness. Her heart tightened, pride mingling with pain. Lauren's chest rose and fell sharply, her fury barely contained. She looked at her mother, searching for support, but even Brianna's poise seemed unsettled. They both knew the truth. Without Vivian, the Gadsden house would close its doors, and their dream of a society wedding would collapse into whispers and embarrassment. Finally, Lauren exhaled hard, her jaw clenched. "Fine, 50-50, but only because we don't have time to start over." Vivian inclined her head as though they had reached a civil agreement, though she knew Lauren surrendered out of necessity, not grace. "That will do, but one more thing." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "What now?" "At the reception," Vivian said calmly, "there will be a toast, acknowledging both families openly, equally. That condition is non-negotiable." Lauren glared, lips pressed tight, but she did not refuse. She couldn't. Vivian arose, smoothing her skirt, collecting her handbag. "Thank you for your time," she said pleasantly, as though they had simply discussed flower arrangements. "I look forward to celebrating together." As she stepped out into the Charleston sun, the heat wrapped around her like armor. The battle was not over, but she had drawn the line. Her son had stood beside her at last, and the balance had shifted. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, the sweet magnolia air filling her lungs. The game was hers to finish, and she intended to finish it well. The tide had turned, but the final test of loyalty and dignity was still waiting at the wedding itself. When Vivian looked back on everything that had happened, she realized the wedding had been more than a celebration. It had been a test of how much dignity she was willing to defend and how far loyalty could stretch when challenged. She thought about the check she had signed, the phone call that had shaken her, the meetings filled with cold smiles, and the dinner where her son's words had cut deep. She remembered the barroom truth that had opened Eric's eyes and the final confrontation where she had drawn the line. Each moment had carried its own weight, but together they formed a lesson she would never forget. Money, appearances, even grand venues mean little if respect and loyalty are not at the foundation. A wedding without family is not a union, it is a performance, and performances fade. What endures is the bond of blood, the strength of heritage, and the dignity of standing firm when others try to erase it. Vivian understood now that silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is the gathering of strength before speaking the truth. She had waited, calculated, and acted when the time was right. And when she spoke, her words carried more power than any raised voice could. She also realized that family bonds should never be negotiated away for convenience. They are not items to be trimmed from a guest list or balanced against a budget. They are the roots that hold people steady, the branches that give shade, the ties that remind us who we are. Eric's journey had been painful to watch. He had wavered, pulled between love and loyalty, blinded by promises of refinement and wealth. But in the end, he remembered the values his mother had taught him. He stood beside her, and in doing so, reclaimed his own dignity. That moment, more than the toast or the venue, was the true victory. For Vivian, the night of the wedding was not about glittering gowns or polished tables. It was about seeing her family present, 30 voices strong, filling the room with warmth. It was about hearing her son acknowledge her openly, proudly, in front of both families. It was about balance restored. She knew the Bennetts would never forget that evening. Their smiles had faltered, their poise unsettled, their control weakened. But she did not gloat. She did not seek revenge. She simply held her dignity, satisfied that her family's place had been secured. In the quiet days after the wedding, Vivian reflected on the lesson. Life has a way of testing us, often in moments we least expect. And when those tests come, we must decide whether to bend or to stand firm. She had chosen to stand. Her story was not just about a wedding, it was about defending heritage, love, and the right to be included. It was about showing that loyalty endures even when challenged by wealth or pride. And it was about proving that one voice, steady and dignified, can change the course of an entire celebration. Vivian knew that appearances fade, but respect lasts, and she carried that truth with her, not only for herself, but for her family, for her son, and for the generations who would remember. Because in the end, true family is not negotiated, it is defended. And dignity, once claimed, becomes the legacy that outlives every celebration.